Hello. I will start with a bit of palm reading. When I was little, once there was an old man in my neighborhood who took my hand and studied my palm for a bit and said to my mom, "Oh, this child, she has a flowery heart." As they say in Cantonese, fa song. Well, in the logic of Chinese palm reading, flowery means frivolous and inconsistent. You get your flowery heart if your palm has these faint crisscrossing lines. Now I know you want to check your palm, right? Go ahead. And perhaps the question you ask is, what lines represent commitment now? Before I give you this answer, here's a counterexample. This is my first American Christmas many, many years ago at my rather wealthy sister-in-law's house. And my 4-year-old nephew sitting in front of the massive tree, practically buried in gifts, of course. I can still picture him now, picking one thing after another, and checking it out momentarily and then tossing it away, and then there's another gift to distract him, and then he's picking that one up, and then there are all of these bows and ribbons and, and the wrappings and whatnot. And before long, he stood up and he was picking and practically tripping over this huge mass of gifts, and eventually he burst into tears and had to be taken away. I guess you call this a case of over-gifted. Nowadays, we don't subject our kids to such frustration, since all that is needed is to get them the latest digital device. It's much simpler, no mess at all. Better yet, all the options are stored behind this shimmering piece of glass. Our machines are so considerate, anytime you want them, they're accessible. Anytime you don't want them, just dismiss. But of course, actually, there's one constant here. Between my nephew, 4-year-old of the 90s, or perhaps the 12-year-old student from last Christmas. In both cases, the constant is overload. Too much accessible within the same field of vision at the same time. In both cases, you can have no time to commit to anything. No time to take responsible for anything at all. When your mind is caught up in constantly choosing and dismissing and discarding and deleting. And all that in the constant anxiety of missing out. Because there's always more. So, you get it. So does a call for commitment. A return to commitment in the sense of giving yourself up, settling down, paying real attention. Commitment to be accountable, to stop browsing and actually walk in the door and throw yourself in. For our youngsters, this may be translated into showing up, raising your hand, and saying, "Count me in." Sticking around to make the best of your choice. And in the process, working hard, perhaps getting hurt, and still not walking away. In the arts, this translates into a box of crayons, worn down to the stubby ends, and still lovingly replaced back in the box, the colors all in the right compartment. Every time. For music, a musical instrument, you know it, darkened and glowing with the sweat of the user, and the drum smoothing and shiny, right, with all that beating. This notion of commitment is actually not new. Most kids instinctively know the difference between losing their smartphone or their own dog dying. And in all that we do with them, they still care more about your approval, the applause of a live audience, or the approval of their peers, than grades, or than any number of likes they get on Facebook. Yet, there's no denying it. Why do I have to advocate this of all things? I mean, of course, there are other things I need to advocate. Dance, for one thing. Because times have indeed changed. We have stiff competition from cyberspace. And it's so much fun. I'm as guilty as any of us, on top of being immensely useful. And we're all infatuated. Yes, we talked about STEM already, just now. It's the rave these days. Our schools are firing artists, our funds are getting cut, and we're raising core standards in the frenzy of catching up with the Koreans and the Chinese and the Singaporeans all winning the competitions in math and science. But really, the issue here is not science versus arts. People in all times, great people, have come up with great works of art, and folk people have come up with great stir-fry dishes and all kinds of folk arts. And scientific discoveries, amazing cures, the bullet train, whatever, you name it. And they all think in different styles, yes, and we all work in different bodies of knowledge. But all of these guys, those people who spark us, just like Sarah in that moment, that transform our lives, we all have one thing in common, and that is the humble commitment. Commitment is what drives sustained effort. It's what gets your renewal sign-ups, not the first-timers. Commitment is what drives deliberate inquiry, the depth of thinking. It's what binds our work with our relationships. As we flirt with life's boundless options more and more these days, it is commitment that would lend focus and depth. And when we get lazy and bored and we want to quit, it is commitment to family and to your friends, the face and the shame of not wanting to face a teacher if you quit. Those things keep us plowing on. When we're frustrated with hardship, it's commitment that makes us practice over and over and get it right, trying it out this way and that and coming up with something new. So there, to answer your question, what lines represent commitment? We talked about all the innate strengths this morning. Well, palm reading will tell you that no lines represent commitment. Palm reading is focused on what you're born with. Just like face reading, by the way, you know, we'll take note of the height of your forehead. But commitment is something that's intrinsically human. Commitment is after you're born with that you bring to the world. Commitment is what you have an obligation to give to others and they to return to you. And commitment is what empowers you to change the world and be changed by it. Commitment doesn't show up on your palm, but it will show up in how we're tied with each other, what we do, how we do it, and what we will become. So there, I don't have the answers, but let's try and figure out how we can get our kids to rediscover the power of commitment. Thank you.